Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I am your host, Mark Gabberty, the content marketing expert, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Hello, Breakthrough Success listeners. I just wanted you all to know before the episode actually starts, I've been working a little bit behind the scenes to give you something really special. So a while ago, I wrote my book, Content Marketing Secrets, which helps people create, promote, and optimize their content for growth and revenue. And I just put the finishing touches together to offer that for free to anyone who is interested. So if you want your free copy of Content Marketing Secrets, all you have to do is head over to markgabberty.com/book. Now, let's jump right into the episode. Have you ever wondered how successful people get to their level of success? Some people may think that it's this monumental shift that has to happen. And while it's important to have a shift in mindset, it's not these dramatically big jumps that get people there. Instead, it's these tiny changes that people make in order to achieve remarkable results. So how do we make these changes that lead to these really great results? That's going to be the focus of today's episode. Today's guest is the author of Atomic Habits, the creator of the Habits Academy, a weightlifter, and a travel photographer in over 30 countries. His writing is focused on how we can create better habits, make better decisions, and live better lives. His work has been covered by dozens of major media outlets, including the New York Times, Time, and on CBS This Morning. Today's guest for episode 275 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than James Clear. James, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's good to talk to you.
James, I'm really happy to have you on the show, and I'm really excited to talk about how it's not these like big leaps that people make. It's like the small stuff that happens, the micro that really leads to these really great results. So a lot to talk about in this episode. But earlier I mentioned that you wrote Atomic Habits. Can you just give us a little bit of the backstory, why you wrote that book, what that was like?
Sure. So I chose the phrase atomic habits for the book for 3 reasons. So the first reason is that the word atomic can mean tiny or small, and that is part of my kind of core philosophy is that habits should be small and easy to do. The second meaning of atomic is that it is the fundamental unit of a larger system. So atoms build into molecules, molecules build into compounds, and so on. And in a sense, you can sort of think of your habits as like the atoms of your life. You know, they're kind of this collection of behaviors, these fundamental units or patterns that we repeat each day. And when you layer them on top of each other or add them together, you can end up with the overall system of habits that kind of make up your life. And then the third and final meaning of atomic is that it's the source of immense energy or power. And I think that helps describe the narrative arc of the book, which is that if you make these small changes, these easy habits, and you layer them on top of each other as these like fundamental units in a larger system, and they're all kind of organized towards the same goal, then you can end up with these powerful or remarkable results in the long run. And so that was kind of the thinking behind the phrase atomic habits. And of course, I wrote the book because we're all building habits day in and day out, some good, some bad. And whether we think about it or not, this process is always happening. So the question is, can we take control of that? Can we design them in some meaningful way? And I think that we can. And so I wrote the book with that in mind and hopefully laid out a framework that pretty much anyone can use to make it easier to build good habits and break bad ones.
James, I really like how you came up with that word atomic. I mean, I can read or I see Atomic Habits. Wow, that's a really great title. This book covers something really important, but the level of depth with the title alone, that's quite the analysis to come up with the title Atomic Habits, which if anyone's interested in implementing tiny changes that lead to remarkable results, Atomic Habits is the book for you, which will be in the show notes. But can you give us a little idea of how tiny changes do lead to these remarkable results? Can you give us an idea of how that would play out?
Sure. So you're building habits all the time, and some of them are positive and some of them are negative. And the hard part is that it doesn't really feel like much on any given day, one way or another. Like the difference between studying a language for 20 minutes tonight or not studying isn't really a whole lot. Like you haven't learned the language either way. Or the difference between eating a salad and chicken for lunch or eating a burger and fries is not really that much. Like your body looks basically the same in the mirror. The scale doesn't really change at the end of the day. And because it seems so minor on a daily basis, it's easy to overlook the long-term impact of these habits and choices. And it's really not until 2 or 5 or 10 years later that the impact of your daily habits becomes fully apparent, and it becomes quite obvious that, whoa, these little 1% changes, these 1% improvements or 1% declines, that they really add up over time. And this is one of the core lessons of habits, and one of the reasons why understanding how they work is so important, which is that habits are like a double-edged sword. They can either compound for you or against you. And that's why understanding the details of how they work and how to design them to your liking is so important, so that you can, effectively avoid the dangerous half of the blade and make sure that you're building habits that are building you up rather than tearing you down. And for this reason, I like to refer to habits as the compound interest of self-improvement, because the same way that money can multiply through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them over time. And so, time will multiply whatever you feed it. If good habits make time your ally, but bad habits make time your enemy. And so by embracing this idea that 1% changes are not just like a little thing or a cherry on top of your performance or something you don't really need to pay attention to, but actually are the master key to unlocking remarkable results over the long run. Once you fully accept that and understand it, then it becomes very clear how important habits are and why we should spend so much time focusing on them.
And I really like how you emphasize that double-edged sword, because even if you don't think you're taking your habit development seriously, like habit development is happening to you. It's not like whether you want to or not, it's actually happening to you, and being aware. And you mentioned 1% every day where it's you're increasing or decreasing. It's still around 1%. I feel like everyone wants to improve every single day. They have an idea, like you mentioned, okay, I have to study the Spanish for 20 minutes each night, or just making better health choices. But you mentioned people sometimes forget about that long term. I think in other cases, it's just not having enough time in the day or just not making the right decisions. So with that in mind, how do we improve every day? I mean, I know it sounds simple, but the implementation is more challenging.
So there are many ways to approach this challenge of getting 1% better each day, or continuous improvement, or endlessly refining and upgrading. In the book, I lay out what I call the 4 laws of behavior change. And the 4 laws of behavior change are sort of like 4 little levers that you can pull, or 4 tools in your toolbox for building better habits. And when the levers are in the right positions, building good habits is easy. And when they're in the wrong positions, building good habits is really hard. And so this process, to answer your question of how do we actually do this, it's really the process of implementing these 4 laws. So we can talk about whichever ones are interesting to you, but just to give a brief example. So let's take the first law is to make it obvious. And so if you want to build a good habit, you need to make the cues that precede that habit or that prompt that habit as obvious as possible. So, for example, for many years, I would have brushed my teeth twice a day, but I wouldn't floss consistently. And I realized that one of the issues was that the floss was hidden away in the drawer in the bathroom. And so I just wouldn't see it and wouldn't think about it. So I bought a little bowl and I put it right next to my toothbrush. And then I got some of the pre-made flossers and I put that in the bowl. And so then as soon as I finished brushing my teeth, put the toothbrush down, pick a flosser up, floss them right then. And that was pretty much all that I needed to do to build that habit. And now I've been doing it for years. And so I made the habit of flossing, the cue of seeing the flossers, much more obvious when it was out and on the counter than when it was tucked away in the drawer. And conversely, for any of these 4 laws of behavior change, if you want to break a bad habit, you just invert the law. So rather than make it obvious, make it invisible. And, if you take an example like watching television. A lot of people feel like they watch too much TV or watch too much Netflix or video games or whatever. Well, if you walk into pretty much any living room, where do all the couches and chairs face? They all face the TV. So what is that room designed to get you to do? It's designed to get you to watch television. It's the most obvious thing in that environment. So there are a variety of steps you could take. You could take like the remote control and put it inside a drawer in the coffee table so that you're less likely to see it. You could take the TV itself and put it inside a wall unit or a cabinet so that you don't see that as often. You could also increase the friction associated with the task. So like you could unplug the TV after each individual use and then only plug it back in if you can say the name of the show that you want to watch. So you're not allowed to just like mindlessly pull up Netflix and find something. Or you could take the remote control batteries out of the remote so that it takes an extra 5 or 10 seconds to power it on. And maybe that's enough time for you to be like, do I really want to watch something, or am I just kind of turning this on out of habit? If you really wanted to be extreme, you could take the TV off the wall and put it in the closet and only take it out when you really wanted to watch something. But the point here is that behaviors that are more obvious are easier to do, easier to build habits around. Behaviors that are less obvious or even invisible are harder to do and less likely to build habits around. And so that's just one of the 4 laws of behavior change. And those are kind of the most effective ways to go about making these 1% improvements and building small habits each day.
And I really like that first law. I mean, I like the TV example because I feel like a lot of people, they do watch a lot of TV, and just being able to like hide the remote or take out batteries, something that is really powerful. And I mean, I feel like we got a lot out of law number 1. I wonder if you could share a little bit of what laws 2 to 4 are and how we can use them to develop the right habits.
Sure. So the second law is to make it attractive. And the idea here is that after you see a cue, you interpret it in some way. There's some kind of prediction that is in between seeing the cue and taking an action or performing the habit itself. And it's really your prediction that determines whether or not a habit is attractive to you, whether you want to perform the behavior. So one way that this is commonly influenced is with your social environment. We are all part of multiple tribes. So some of them are large, like what it means to be American or Australian or a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever. And some of them are small, like what it means to be a neighbor on your street or a member of your local gym or someone who volunteers at the local organization. And all of those tribes, each one, large and small, has a set of shared expectations that are part of the group. And so, you can just imagine like some really big, broad habits. So like, if you step onto an elevator, everybody turns around and face the front. Or if you have an interview, everybody wears like a suit and tie or a dress or something nice. Now, there's no reason it has to be like that, right? Like you could face the back of the elevator or you could wear a bathing suit to a job interview, but we don't do it because it violates the shared expectations for that tribe or that group. And it's similar for all the other tribes that you belong to. They all have these like shared expectations or shared habits that are performed. And when behaviors go against the shared expectations of the group, they're very unattractive and it's hard to build habits. And then when they go with the shared expectations of the group, they are very attractive and we're more likely to build them. And so what you want to do is to find a group where your desired behavior is the normal behavior, because you won't be going against the grain of the tribe. And, for example, if you wanted to get into shape, well, there are a lot of people when they go to work out for the first time, like they feel kind of out of place, or they, it feels like a sacrifice or a challenge to go to the gym all the time. But there are plenty of people out there who going to the gym each week doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It's just what they do every week. It's just normal. And so if you can hang out with those people or get exposed to those tribes, then it's more likely that you'll see it as normal yourself. Now, the caveat here, and the thing that really makes habits stick in this context, is that you need to have some other way to belong with the group. The thing that makes you want to stick to the shared expectations of the group is that you care about the opinions of those people, that you want to belong with them, you want to be friends with them. If you don't really care about the opinions of the tribe we're talking about, if you don't really care about belonging with them, if you don't have friendships there, then you don't have a reason to stick to the standard behavior. So it's often most effective to join a group where your desired behavior is the normal behavior and you already have something in common with the group. Because if you already have some other shared context or like mutual interest, then you can become friends over that thing. Like, if you happen to join a gym and you find that there are some other people there who are like really into gardening and you love gardening, well, now you can be friends talking about gardening. And then you end up enjoy going to the gym and getting your workouts in and taking on the habits of those other people in the group because you're friends with them. The friendship is the thing that you don't want to lose, and the habits are the thing that you take on to stick with that. So that's one example of the second law of behavior change, which is make it attractive.
I mean, I really like how you talked about the groups because I feel like the Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with, is that is a very big truth that I feel like a lot of people need to be exposed to. And if some people may feel like they're not in the right community, they may not be around the right people. If that is you, you could be in a Facebook group like the Breakthrough Success Group. You can host a podcast and interview people who you admire. So there's a lot of ways to find that group of people who can help you develop the right habits that can then help you get to the remarkable results. And with habit development, there's so much that we can be doing that makes it go right. There's so much that can make it go wrong. But what do you believe holds most people back from being able to develop the habits that they want and need also for their lives?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of challenges and pitfalls and things that can cause habits to fall off track. But I'll give you one thing that I think is crucial for getting habits to stick. So the fourth law of behavior change is to make it satisfying. And the first 3 laws are really about getting a habit to start the first time or to occur that time. But the fourth law, make it satisfying, is really the thing that gets people to come back again and again. It's the type of thing that makes a habit last. And this makes sense if you think about it. I mean, there is, with each behavior, there's some kind of result. And if the result is positive or enjoyable, then it's sort of like a positive emotional signal to your brain where it says, hey, that felt good. You should do this again next time. And so there's like a reason to repeat it. If a behavior is not enjoyable, then you don't have much reason to come back to it again and again. And so in this sense, like positive emotions cultivate habits and negative emotions destroy habits. And so what you really need is for the ending of a behavior to be satisfying and enjoyable. And the key factor here is speed. So in the book, I refer to this as the cardinal rule of behavior change, which is that behaviors that are immediately rewarded get repeated, and behaviors that are immediately punished get avoided. And it's really about the immediacy, how quickly you feel successful, that gets you to come back to it or not. And one way to think about this is that any behavior produces multiple outcomes across time. So say, for example, if you have a bad habit like eating a donut, well, the immediate outcome is favorable. It's sugary, it's tasty, it's sweet, you enjoy it right then. The ultimate outcome is if you continue this habit, then you'll gain weight in a month or whatever. And good habits are often the reverse. So going to the gym right now is hard and effortful. It takes sweat and energy and some effort. And so the immediate outcome is kind of unfavorable, but the ultimate outcome, if you continue this, you'll be fit in a month or a year or whatever, is favorable. And so a lot of the challenge of getting habits to stick and of staying on track with your habits is figuring out how to pull the long-term consequences of your bad habits into the present moment. So you feel a little bit of that pain right now and you have a reason to avoid it. And the long-term benefits of your good habits into the present moment so that you feel a little bit of the pleasure right now and you have a reason to repeat it again next time. And there are a couple ways to do this. So one way is to use an external reinforcer, like, if I go to the gym 5 days in a row, then I get to have a bubble bath or get a massage or something like that. The other way, though, and the ultimate way to get habits to stick in the long run and to feel immediate satisfaction in the moment is a reinforcement of your desired identity. So, imagine if you're the type of person who views yourself as a writer. Well, each time you sit down to write a sentence, you don't need to wait for the long-term reward of the article or the book to be finished. You get to feel successful in the moment because you're reinforcing that identity of, I'm the type of person who writes at least one sentence every day or something like that. Same thing is true for going to the gym. If you're trying to foster the identity of, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts, well, as soon as you show up, you can feel successful. You don't have to wait to get stronger for the scale to change or something like that. And that can be really powerful in the short run because that reinforcement of your desired identity gets you to show up again while you're waiting for the long-term rewards of the delayed gratification to show up in a few weeks or a few months. And so in that sense, identity is a really powerful reinforcer of behavior in the near term and ultimately in the long term as well.
And I really like how you changed that goal to have some feeling of gratification right away, where, as you mentioned with identity, I'm that person who writes one sentence every day. That's not like the book's not done with that one sentence, but showing up, writing that one sentence, it turns into two, it turns into paragraphs, and over time, then you have the finished book. So I really like that identity and being able to get the gratification a little sooner as you go towards that long-term objective that you're going after. And I mean, I know you've done a lot of research on habits. I mean, when you write a book called Atomic Habits, you've done a lot of research in the area. So what are the habits that you currently have that you feel the most important for your success?
Well, it's a big question, and there are a couple habits that are like I think just make a difference for anybody's life, no matter what you're working on. So exercise is a huge one. I happen to be really into strength training. I don't think it has to be weightlifting. It could be rock climbing or kayaking or hiking or just a daily walk. Like there's, any form of movement can be really useful there. The other big one for me is sleep. So, my kind of personal rule is that I don't cheat myself on sleep. The challenge is that one of the habits I struggle with is a power down ritual. So, there'll be a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I wish I went to bed at 10, but then I'm up, working till midnight or something like that. And if that's the case and I'm up till midnight or 1, well, I don't cheat myself on sleep. So I'm going to be sleeping till 8 or 9 or something like that. And so that's just more a consequence of the power down ritual than the sleep itself. But getting enough sleep is crucial. I'll give you 2 other habits that I feel like are huge for me. So the first one is reading. Reading is sort of like a meta habit in the sense that it can make any other habit easier. Whatever habit you're struggling with or whatever problem you're facing, you can read a book about it and get better. Like if you want to become a better writer, well, you can read about that. If you want to learn how to build a successful business, you can read about that. If you want to lose weight, you can read about how to do that, or follow a different diet, you can read about that. And the same is true for almost any other area of life. If you can cultivate a habit of reading, then you can solve almost any problem that you face. And so in that sense, it's a very powerful habit. And then the final one that I'll share is writing. And the reason is not just because I'm an author and it's kind of like central to my business, but also just from a deeper sense, being a good writer will serve you well in pretty much any job. Writing effectively, a lot of miscommunication or problems in a business arise because people can't write effectively or don't write effectively. You wrote one thing in the email, but then the recipient thought something else, and now you have to have a meeting to rectify it and figure all that out. And like all this could just been avoided if you had written like with a little bit more clarity in the beginning. So writing will help you in that sense. But perhaps more importantly, writing, even if you don't want to share it with anyone, is a great way to think. In many cases, I don't really know what I think about something until I write about it. it's the act of writing that reveals what my actual thoughts are and allows me to have the logic and the space to figure out and wrestle with an issue and see how I actually feel. So I would say that reading, writing, sleep, and exercise would be 4 really crucial ones that I would focus on.
James, thank you for sharing with us some of those great habits. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that power down habit, because I feel like I feel like that's a habit not a lot of people are trying to develop. So can you talk a little bit more about what your power down ritual looks like and what you're doing to get better at implementing it?
Sure. So I do think it's an important one. As I mentioned, this is one that I struggle with personally and haven't really developed a good solution to, but I'll share a couple ideas that I've come across that I think could be helpful and I'm planning on implementing myself. So one of them, which I think is just a brilliant strategy, my friend Nir Eyal, who also writes about habits and behavior, he used this thing called an outlet timer. So an outlet timer is, you can get it on Amazon for like $10. And it's basically a device that it's kind of like an adapter. You plug it into the outlet and then you plug your device into the timer. And you can set the outlet timer to kill the power from that outlet at a particular time. So say, 10 p.m. or something. Well, Nir, the smart thing that he did was he plugged his internet router into the outlet timer and then set it to turn the power off turn the internet off at 10 p.m. each night. So it's like, well, internet's gone. Can't watch Netflix, can't browse the web. Guess it's time to go to bed. And I love things like that, which I would call like a one-time decision that makes the habit easier every time in the future. And so those one-time decisions that have long-term payoffs, I mean, there are a variety of them that are related to sleep. So an outlet timer is one example, but you could also imagine like getting blackout curtains for your bedroom so that it's really dark in there. That could be one. Getting an eye mask so that you can sleep well when you're traveling, or earplugs if you sleep in a noisy environment. Buying a better mattress so that you can sleep more soundly there each night. All of those are examples of one-time choices that make habits easier again and again in the future. And so I think a lot of the time, if you're struggling to build a new habit, figuring out little ways like that to kind of like force your hand or make that process much easier for you without you having to muster willpower, I think that's a more effective way of changing that habit, and something that I think you could apply to both sleep and the power down ritual itself.
And I really like how you mentioned setting our hours. Like, for instance, like at 10 p.m., the internet goes down for us. So I feel like that's one of the things as entrepreneurs, like we don't necessarily set our hours. Like our work expands with the amount of time that we're physically awake. So if you're setting that time, it's easier for you to power down, as James mentioned. So I really appreciate you sharing that insight with us. And you also mentioned reading as a powerful habit of yours. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could share with us 3 books that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
Yeah, good question. So the first book, pretty popular right now, it's called Sapiens, and it gives you a good overview of like how much of human society works. It's like a really interesting insight into culture and why we believe certain things. And anyway, I feel like that one would be a good book to look at. Another book that I really enjoyed that I would recommend is called Manual for Living by Epictetus. And this is one of the Stoic philosophers. And I think Manual for Living is like the most accessible of the Stoic books, and is a really good one to share. But it's, the principles in it are 2,000 years old, but they feel like they're timeless. So anyway, that's a good one to read. And then the third one I'd recommend is called The Lessons of History. And it was written by a husband-wife combo named Will and Ariel Durant. And they were historians for 60 years or their entire career, and they spent most of that career writing this massive compendium of basically all of history, this huge volume. And once they finished, they wrote this little book called Lessons of History that's like 100 pages, and it talks about the overarching themes across all of that. Like, what are some of the fundamental themes of humanity that occur again and again? And it's a really beautiful insight into the human condition and how human behavior works. Like what has not changed over time. And so anyway, those 3 I think are a good place to start.
James, thank you for sharing with us those great book recommendations. Those books, the link to Atomic Habits and also my book, Podcast Domination, will all be in the show notes, markabirdy.com/E275. And before we wrap up this episode of Breakthrough Success, James, I've asked you several questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
I think we could ask ourselves, what season am I in? And so what I mean by that is I've started to look at life as a series of seasons. And so the question, what season am I in, kind of gets you to reflect and think about what habits and actions, what areas of focus are best for my current season. Like I'm sure many people are similar to me in the sense that they have a variety of interests, or there's a lot of things that you would like to accomplish. Like for me, I don't know how to play a musical instrument. I can't read music. I would love to do something musical, but it's not the right season for that, because each hour that I put toward music would be an hour that takes away from my writing career or weightlifting or some of the other things that are important to me right now. And I think that if you embrace this idea that there's a series of seasons, and at some point you'll transition to the next season, and you can take some of the things that you were spending time on now and put those on the back burner and pick up some new stuff that you didn't have time for previously. It helps me stay focused in the moment, and it helps me not feel bad about putting off some of those things that I feel like I'd love to do someday. So the question I would suggest to ask yourself is, what season am I in right now?
James, thanks for sharing with us that great question. And it really gets us to think, which dreams should we be pursuing now? And for dreams that we feel like we can't get to yet, like in James' case with the music, it gets us the idea where, hey, we can get this done in another season, but let's go all in with the current season. And so, James, thank you for sharing with us that question, all of your great insights throughout our time together as well. Don't forget, everyone, to get your copy of Atomic Habits. That will be in the show notes of this episode. But James, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing all of your great advice with us. It was such a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And if folks are looking for more on the book, atomichabits.com is a great place to start. And there's also a couple bonuses there. So there's like a secret chapter that's not in the book itself. There's some chapter by chapter audio commentary from me on why I wrote each chapter and some of the research behind it. There are there's an appendix on like how to apply the ideas in the book to business and how to apply the ideas to parenting, and just a variety of templates and downloads. And so I know you'll link to all that, but that's available at atomichabits.com.
We'll have you covered in the show notes as well. Thank you again, James, for being on the show.
Great. Thank you.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn